To this point, we have done the part of just identifying a rhetorical device inside of a speech, which is, I'm glad you're able to do that. That's good. But now it's time to take this thinking a step further. We know what they are. Now we need to understand why they're doing it. This is important because if you're looking at anyone that's trying to convince you to do something, you need to understand this is the things of which they're doing it, and then how are they using those to convince me. And so we're going to take this speech and do that portion of it. So what I've done is I've taken one particular paragraph, and I'm going to look through this at the devices. I will show you when I see one. Hopefully you've already identified most of these. And we're going to figure out what these devices together are being used to do in this one little piece. And once again, you still have your speech out in front of you. And when I'm done going through this one paragraph, you're going to go ahead and mark it up with me. Some of the markings you will already have given because you should have already identified these devices on your own. However, I'm now going to talk about, what appeal is being used. So now we're looking at what are they trying to pull off? Are they trying to pull off, as a reminder, ethos, which you can't read that. There we go. Ethos, which is, we know, building credibility with the audience. We have pathos, which is trying to get the speaker, the audience to feel something. And we have logos, which is basically logic. Okay? So let's read this paragraph, and we're going to start right here. Okay. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves longer. Sir, we have done everything that can be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer room for any hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not to basely abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until, and we'll stop there. So what's going on here? Well, first and foremost, I know that I'm seeing all these guys right here. Whoop, whoop. Here we go. All these. If you should never have trouble identifying a rhetorical question in a speech, because it's actually pretty easy. You see a question mark? We know we have a rhetorical question. So we'll put a big RQ. We're using that. Okay? We're doing everything that we could to avert the storm, which is now coming. Alright? There isn't technically a thunderstorm coming. It's a war. But they're calling it a storm, which is a metaphor. So we know we have a metaphor. We have parallel. We have an anaphora with we have. We know that this is one that I gave you before. We know that these are also parallel. That they're also restatement. We know all these things are going on. But what is he doing? Well, I look at the first part of the paragraph and I see what he's asking questions that he knows what the answer has to be. It's kind of like a controlled question. You wouldn't ask someone a question if you're trying to persuade them unless you know the answer comes out on your side. And a smart person that's good at rhetoric is going to do this very well. And throughout this entire speech, Henry does a great job with this. He continuously asks questions that he knows the answer to. And unless you're crazy, you're going to come up with his answer. And he knows that unless you're crazy, you're going to it's going to force you to think the way he needs you to think. And I said a key word here. I said think. okay? And then, so after he sets up these questions, he then comes through and he kind of answers them. All right, so what have we done? Because think about it. If you're one of the people that are arguing against him, no one in that convention thinks that things are going well with the British government right now. They're all aware that things are going very badly. The options available to the people in that room are twofold. One is they can continue to try to make deals with the government and eventually get things fixed slowly through diplomatic means and treaties and stuff. Not a treaty because they're part of the same country, but just diplomatic negotiations and trying to get, and they can just continue to ask for more rights and a representative in parliament, or they can go to war. What we know, Henry knows, and he's answering that question. They're going to say, we shouldn't just go to war, we should continue trying to work this out. Well, he's asking him, how's it gone so far? Because this is not a route that has not already been taken. They've already tried before. So he's simply pointing out, because he knows if you think this through, guys, you have no argument because we've been trying this for 10 years and you're going to tell us to try it again. And so what he does is he asks questions. He wants to try argument? That's what you want to do because that is one of the things they're trying to say. We need to argue with the government. He's saying, we've already done that before. Okay? He goes back here and he says, shall we resort to entreaty humble supplication? What terms are we going to be using to have an argument? So basically it's like, we've already done this. You going to argue with them again? Really? Okay. What are you going to offer this time? What have we not done that you could do your way yet? Because the answer he knows is nothing. We've done everything. And then on top of that, he comes back with parallelism, and what he's doing is he is repeating it in the same way because he's slowing it. It slows the speech, okay, and it becomes redundant so that as he's talking, it draws attention to what he's saying. We have done all these things. We have supplicated. We have remonstrated. We have done all these things trying to get them to do it. Then he comes back and says, okay, to those requests, they have done this. They have done that. And what he is doing is he is forcing them to deal with the answer to questions the questions that are basically burning in their mind as they're trying to argue with him. But what he's done is by using these questions up top, he has created a situation where he's forced the train of thought to go exactly where it needs to go. Because if you think about it, these people that are arguing against going to war are trying to avoid bloodshed. Which are things that should be avoided for the most part. They're trying to avoid committing treason, okay? But the bare facts of things at this point is that their attempts so far have been unsuccessful, and they've been attempts that have been at trying to diplomatically get what they want. And so as an intelligent arguer, what Henry is basically doing is he's not allowing the audience to see this or to think in another route. He's using his rhetorical questions to funnel the listener into where he wants their train of thought to be. And then he's basically tearing apart the argument that we need to argue more about this. Why? Because we have done it. So if you look at this, while there is no, you could call this evidence, we've done these things, okay? They haven't listened to us. But this is a great example of logos in a non-evidence, non-example way, okay? Really and truly, this is a reasoning way. He is saying, okay, here is what you're saying we should do. And let me tell you about how that's not worked. And he is working very hard on his reader from a logical standpoint. And that makes this, let me give you a different color, make it nice and thick. Wait, wrong one, sorry. Wide. Logos. Now, here's what I will say. If you were to read this paragraph further, and you already have, you're going to realize that you're going to start seeing something else popping up a good bit inside this little paragraph that we're reading. Right here. Okay. These are exclamation marks. You should have already identified, but you might not have. Go through and look at them. And notice how often they move to this piece. When you're looking at any speech, you have to trust your gut to a certain extent to figure this out. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, what is he trying to do? What is at work here? When he asks me that question, am I getting emotional? And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes the reasoning, all right, that they have you using will lead you to an emotion. That's very true, and I'll be honest with you, this speech is a very emotional speech. So finding an example of pathos isn't hard, but you can also find an example of pathos that is also logos, because it's reasoning, and the reasoning is going to make you mad, but you're still being reasoned with. So you have to ask yourself, what is being done? Is this device using to make me angry? Is he trying to get me to trust him? What is he doing? And I will give you one really, really good hint that we haven't covered this time, but it helps me. When I'm looking for pathos, or someone is trying to play with my emotions, I look for something, and I'm going to write across here. I'm going to get it thick so you can actually read it. Called, a loaded word. Loaded words. Okay? And you know this, because you studied it a lot before. But a loaded word is a word that has emotional connotation. Emotional connotation. Connotation is a feeling behind a word. So, for an example of that would be a word like slavery, okay? You can't say slavery without there being an extreme negative feeling with it. If you're looking for if you're reading a passage, no matter how logical the evidence is, if they are using words that have emotional charges to them, then they're clearly also trying to play with your emotions. That's one really good hint. If you're reading a passage and you're seeing a lot of loaded words like in this speech, it could be slavery, tyranny, whatever it is, okay? We saw out on the first page, we said, I don't know if y'all noticed, I picked out the illusion of hope. He's calling the hope an illusion. That's loaded, okay? Trying to find a good one in here, but I just covered over most of them. But I mean, like, you gotta look for that, right? Tyrannical, this word right here, that is as loaded can get. Now, some words for you are gonna be a little bit harder because you don't reckon the word is not gonna have tyranny, is not going to have the same emotional impact on you than it would on someone in this time frame. So sometimes we have to go back and kind of think about the era that we're talking about. But if I'm looking, do I see loaded words? If I see loaded words, then I know pathos has to be in play. But if I see a lot of rhetorical questions, that is generally a good indication that you're probably going to be dealing with logos. But remember, two can work together. A great speech, a good persuasive speech, will have all three being used. Maybe not at once, but they will all be used. You're going to find ethos in this speech. You're going to find pathos. You're going to find logos. You're going to find two of them in the same paragraph or in the same sentence. But your job now is to go back, go through each paragraph, all through the devices, and tell me, what is the device trying to do? Is it trying to be logical? Is it trying to build your trust? Or is it trying to get you to get emotional? Go ahead and go back and label yours as well. So I would label this one, I would say, primarily I'm seeing logos in this speech. But there are loaded words, and I think that this train of thought is probably going to get someone emotional. Like, hey, it's not working. They're not listening to me. What? So I think you can see pathos playing in this one as well. Okay? So maybe it's logos, but he is definitely going to take it to pathos later. Now it's your turn. Venture forth and find me some examples of each. Good luck to you.